After me, I have Cooper Levy-Baker, then I have Rod Thompson and Candace McCallia. They are on today because we're going to do a political roundtable. And all right, so as we said, we're going to each hit a topic, and we're going to let Candace go first. Candace, what did you bring to the table today?
All right, so I want to talk about Michelle Obama's school lunch program. This week there was a big article, I think it was on BuzzFeed, but basically where they showed the typical American school lunch and how...
Oh, I saw that from all around the world, too.
Yes, and they compared it to other school lunches. You can probably find it on your laptops. We're very,
Cooper's looking really quick.
Yeah, and it showed a picture of the typical American school lunch. It compared it to other school lunches in other countries around the world. Italy had one up there.
Greece.
I think Greece, I think Japan.
Korea.
And basically painting the light that our school lunches are just absolutely horrific and abysmal. So first, I would just like to throw out to you guys, what do you think? I mean, should school lunch policy be set by the federal government? What do you think?
Ooh,
No.
I was like,
I think
Go ahead, Rod.
it should be set by the local school board who's accountable to the parents in that community. I mean, this is something I circle back on a lot,
Sure.
but it's what makes sense. Because if I have children in the school district and I am concerned about what they're having for lunch, I don't want to have to try and figure out a bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. Okay, hopeless task, right? I'd rather be able to just contact my local school board member and say, hey, this is no good, I need it changed.
Well, that's actually a really good point because you can't do that now. If you contact them, they're going to say, well, we're mandated by the federal government.
Right.
However, this is the philosophy of why they put this in place, was basically so if we make our children healthier and we feed them healthier breakfast, lunch, after school snacks or what have you, in the long run they're going to be healthier, which they will be less money for us for social services. We won't be paying for medical issues, we won't be paying for sickness and all that other stuff. So that's kind of the whole philosophy behind it.
Do we know exactly how, I mean, what's relationship, like what are the mandates? I mean, do they have to that a school district obviously sets the menu, so what exactly do they have to meet? What are the rules?
Okay, so here's how it does trickle down into your local schools. And I'm talking from Manatee County's perspective because that's where my kids go to school. But basically everything, they need to be offered healthier choices on the lunch menu. And so if you do an online search of this, you'll see that people have been posting photos of their horrific lunches and what they can opt for now with the hashtag Thanks Michelle Obama, right? And
Totally undue credit, but
right.
go ahead.
But and it's a massive spin PR campaign pro and against what she's trying to do, but you're so limited as to what you can eat with these new guidelines. And in fact, where I have a major issue with this is that as a parent, I'm limited in what I can send in for my child as a snack.
Yeah, I don't understand that. Is it a snack for your child or a snack to share with the whole class?
Both.
Seriously.
Every day you send in a snack for the kids get about 15-minute snack time in the morning or in the afternoon, depending on what grade level. So I have to look at this little chart that I printed today.
I know,
Actually,
but
the
nobody
school
can
board
see.
provided this for me. So yeah, it has to be less than or equal to 200 calories, less than or equal to 200 milligrams of sodium,
Wow.
less than or equal to 35% of calories going for fat, less than 10% saturated fat, 0 grams of trans fat. So when I'm in the grocery store shopping for snacks, but on top of that, now our teachers are having to monitor this. So my daughter I can't even send her like 3 M&Ms in her lunchbox.
What grade are your kids in?
3rd and 1st.
Okay, so that's where snacks are really important.
Right. I mean, granted, most cases I'm going to send my kids a healthy snack. Most days I send them an apple or carrots.
Sure.
But that should be my prerogative. If I want to send my daughter apples and 3 M&Ms,
I agree.
I should be able to do that. And she's afraid. I mean, we're now turning our teachers into snack Nazis. They've got to walk around and see, oh, you can't eat that M&M. I mean, no candy,
Really?
no chocolate.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So Rod and I will probably agree on this, is that it's a little over the top.
It's
On
way over the
regulation,
top.
and
Yeah.
I did not have that experience. I had just the opposite experience, and my son's in high school right now, so it's even worse. But there was no suggestions whatsoever. In fact, it's the snacks and things that were available. We always had to bring in snacks in elementary school, but it was always the prepackaged processed stuff, the cookies, the candy, the whatever, and we sent that in. Where my son's a vegetarian, and there is never really any option. Even now, at the high school level, when he wants a salad, every salad has meat in it. And so everything is meat based.
But what about Meatless Monday?
Well, that just was implemented.
I know.
But my son's lost now because I have packed my son's lunch, or he has packed it. We both pack it together now for his whole entire time.
So are you allowed to take packed lunches, your own packed lunches?
Oh
to
yeah, we don't
school?
have the same regulation
What
that
about,
that
what
Candace
about
does.
Manatee schools?
Yeah, I only send them. And here's the other thing. I mean, I will not let my children buy school lunches because they're
Yeah, I
so
agree.
unhealthy.
I agree.
I'm afraid of what's in the chicken. I'm afraid of even with these federal mandates. I mean, in my opinion, why don't we look at GMOs and why don't we look at the dyes in foods and why don't we look at Monsanto? And, that would be a better place, in my opinion, for Michelle Obama to start rather than with.
Well, I
We're
think
talking about
I
some
think
major contributors to campaigns.
that's true
Yeah,
too.
I know.
Yeah, and I don't know who was appointed as the head of the FDA, the lobbyist for Monsanto. So I give you that, and I think it's a little unfair to tag her to it because she's just trying to get kids to eat more healthy vegetables, grow your own food, and exercise. And this regulation wasn't set by her, but that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I agree that there should be a sense of freedom for the parent, and parents aren't that stupid. If they send their kids with food that is not deemed nutritious, its chances are because they can't afford it.
Yeah.
Okay, let me channel my mom, who was a teacher for 30-some years. If you send a child in 1st or 3rd grade with a snack that's all sugar, you're going to put them on a sugar
I
high that the
agree.
teacher's going to have to deal with.
So you would agree with these guidelines?
No.
Okay, Rod, you just contradicted
I
yourself. How is
just-
that possible?
No, I didn't. I just stated that what teachers would say about
Well,
it.
but that's what these guidelines essentially say too, except they really spell it out. And I get the reason that they want to spell it out so specifically because parents will write in and say, well, I don't get it. What am I supposed to be doing? What am I supposed to be looking at?
Now you can buy accepted snacks from the school district.
Seriously,
Yeah.
really?
Sure.
Yeah. See, Sarasota, at least my experience is not like that at all. Manatee, on the other hand, it's too much, I would say.
And by the way, you can't
But this
even
is a
send in
separate issue.
cupcakes anymore for birthdays.
But this is a separate
Well,
issue, though,
that's a
too, from
different-
school lunches. I mean, school lunches have been abysmal forever.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think, honestly, if people are trying to set some sort of standards for how those school lunches look, then I'm okay with that. Because what in high school was bagels, French fries,
Sure.
garbage.
I will tell you-
And there was no healthy options.
When I was a Riverview High School student, and they had a salad bar that was really, really nice. The kids got to go up and make their own salad. So when my son
When
went,
was this?
was, do I have to date myself?
Because by the late
did
90s,
it.
that had
No,
disappeared.
no, exactly.
well, that
Yeah.
didn't exist
Yeah.
in the 70s.
It did.
I
It
didn't
Not
did.
in Michigan, it
either.
didn't.
Well, here in
I didn't
Florida,
have that. I went to Riverview.
what year did you go?
I graduated in '92.
Okay, so I'm at least 10 years older than you.
Math, let me do the math.
Okay, it was that way in 1980, 1981, 1982.
Wow.
Surprisingly, it really was. So when my son got to high school, I expected the same thing, and it's not. What I find a little bothersome is that while they're happy to regulate all the parents, take a look at the school meal itself.
That's right.
When my son the reason why I went back to preparing lunches for him is because he spent in middle school, all he ate was nachos and cheese and pizza
Right.
every single day because as a vegetarian there was no other option for him.
But don't you find that consistent with how government operates, particularly the federal government? I mean, Congress is famous on a bipartisan basis for passing laws that do not apply to them.
Sure.
That's constant. with
Absolutely,
government.
like healthcare, for example.
Yeah, they already had the best healthcare plan on
Exactly.
the planet.
They should just expanded their health care and we would have been happy. All right, on that note. Right, Rod?
And broke.
All right, Candace, you wanna give a wrap up to this?
Yeah, so the only thing I would say is that, I personally feel that parents should have the authority to give their kids whatever they want. And, despite the fact that, some parents might be sending in sugar for their kids. Most parents, I don't think will do that. And I think teachers have a lot of other things to deal with where they shouldn't be having to monitor their kids' snacks. That's
agree.
where it's really, really hits home for me.
Yeah, I want to talk about net neutrality. This has been a hot topic, I think, for the last couple of years, kind of ramping up in intensity. And the FCC voted just last Thursday to classify internet providers as quote-unquote common carriers. And I think it's a huge move because what it does is it ensures that, for the time being at least, that internet service providers, people like Comcast, Verizon, will not be able to discriminate what kinds of traffic they do or give different types of speeds to different providers. Essentially, it cements the principle that when you're online, every piece of content is arriving at the same speed, and it doesn't give an unfair advantage to a company that might want to, push you toward their product. So I think it's a huge ruling, and I know there are going to be a ton of lawsuits over it, and so it's not necessarily set in stone at this point, but I think it's going to have repercussions for a long time.
And in particular, I want to say that, so people understand it, is it's now being regulated as a utility.
Yeah,
And that
like
I
a
think
telephone
is key.
line.
Exactly like a telephone line. What's important to know as well is this came up because carriers like Comcast, Verizon, I can't think. What's the old 10-turner one? I'm looking at Candace and she's like, I have no clue. Don't ask me.
The Turner.
But they came in and said, we want to develop a fast lane
Yeah.
that allows us to deliver our content better for more money. And those who choose not to participate can go to the slow lane. And the reason why it was pretty significant is, first of all, and I know we're probably going to get into the discussion about government regulation, and it was not essentially regulated by the FCC up until this ruling. The reason why it was important, and I say this all the time, is because by not allowing that free and open internet, companies like Netflix, Facebook, Yahoo, Google would not have had the access to the internet in the same way when they first started up. Not everybody comes with a ton of venture capitalism before they actually launch their company. There are companies like us that are sitting here at the table that each have a website that would have been operating in the sense of what we used to remember as the dial-up. Remember that? You have the phone ringing and the whole business.
Go
and you
cook dinner, come back.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's essentially what would have happened. And this has been a fight that's been going on for a very long time. However, a couple years ago, when the federal government also tried to regulate the internet use via the SOPA and PIPA bills that were out there that was fought, it was all kind of led into that. Rod, I know you're waiting.
Well, yeah, no, that's fine. You're doing great. But the problem to me, a couple of problems. Number one is that the background you just gave was just so true. And the problem is that once you let the FCC, F standing for federal government, once you let the FCC start regulating the internet, I think you've got more than a camel's nose under the tent there. And what we know with regulatory agencies is that they never stop. They're never satisfied there. This is a good place to arrive at. This is where we will stay. And you were mentioning off the air about how many things you do just with your radio station that require FCC approval.
Correct.
And it's a pain in the neck dealing with it. And I can't imagine how much innovation and technology might have been stifled if the FCC had been sort of handling this from the time of dial-up, as you were talking about all along. I kind of feel like we might still be in dial-up age if we didn't have if we hadn't allowed a wild, wild west sort of thing on the internet.
But the internet is a government creation. I mean, I think that the whole history of it is that government has played a role since the very beginning.
The government played a role through the military use. Yes, it got it started, but the government's been out of it for a long time. It didn't explode while the government was in it. It exploded when the private sector got in it. I don't think you can really give government a whole lot of credit for where the internet is now.
No, actually, what you can give them credit on is they allowed it to get that way. They allowed it to be an open internet. And that's terrific until these large corporations come in and say, we want to have a bigger piece of it and not have open access to everyone. That's when they came back in and stepped in and said, all right, well, we can't have that because we want to maintain it as an open internet.
I think what people need to understand or figure out is how is it going to affect us on the bottom line? Is it going to affect my internet bill? How is it going to affect me, the consumer, at the end?
But see, I get that, but don't just think it as me, the consumer. Think about it as me, the business person. Think about me, the business person who needs to compete in the same world that all the big companies compete in. Here's an example. We talk about FCC regulation in my radio station. I'm a small independent local radio station. I am under the big cloud of major Clear Channel, which has now rebranded themselves as iHeartRadio. They have 5 radio stations in the area. Then on top of that, I have bigger radio stations in Tampa that broadcast so loud, so much that you can pick up their stations in Sarasota as well. Well, radio airwaves are like a real estate map. We all own a little piece of it. It's the FCC that allows me to maintain my piece. So when I'm getting a broadcast that comes in every once in a while, especially when you get to the outer realm of my broadcast signal, you get a little Spanish, and you'll go, wait, is she turning her station into a Spanish station? No, that's actually the station in Arcadia that shares the same numbers on the dial as I do. And if they're expanding their reach more than they should, I'll get bleed over. And so then I'll get calls from my listeners that say, what's wrong with your station, when really it's not. So there's a certain sense of the FCC that to have them regulate, so I just go to the FCC and let them handle it than having to deal with stations that have 5 times the amount of money that I do.
So but when you're talking about that regarding the FCC and how it handled the airwaves, it makes a certain amount of sense because the airwaves bleed all over into each other. It was the Wild West really wasn't going to work there very well at all. I mean, it was going to be chaos. But that hasn't been the case, and I feel like there's maybe a little dictum here that just works really well, and that's that if it isn't broken, don't fix it.
But I think that's the point, because that's what they said too, right, Cooper?
Well, the whole reason that they had to reclassify it was because the FCC lost a lawsuit. They had created the Open Internet Order in 2010 and then lost a lawsuit over that. So they were actually trying to preserve those principles that exist currently, and then those were fought by the big communications companies. So it's not that. So people were actively lobbying to change what was the reality of the internet, and that was coming from private corporations, not the government.
Right, who are providing internet to businesses and consumers and all.
Yeah. But I guess. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, the other thing I think that's really interesting about this, and we were chatting a little bit about this, is about how sort of ideological divides on this issue are breaking down. And I see a lot of kind of interesting new cooperation alliances. And also, I think there's this big split in the tech community. I mean, you have like differences between the internet service providers and kind of startups like Tumblr, Twitter. A lot of these companies were coming out in favor of net neutrality. And so I think there's I'll be interested to see if, now that those companies have had a big win, if they're going to sort of be pushing for other changes at the federal level.
You know, the irony in this whole thing is when we're talking about these big monopolies, such as Comcast and Verizon, and we're worried about the FCC regulating the internet, and yet you come into local municipalities, how many choices do we have here? 2.
Right.
2 choices in Sarasota. So what do? We flip between both of them because we hate all of them. And, you know, that's your only recourse, is to go from one to the other. You can move to Bradenton and then you get Bright House. Why is it that this free enterprise, this great opportunity, and we've only, our local municipalities have contracted with them to say that there's only 2 people in the competition. I mean, where did the consumer loses out altogether? That's what I'm concerned with. If we opened up the internet to allow a slow lane and a fast lane, then you get that free enterprise, but yet look what it's done to us.
Well, right. So maybe I got confused there. I thought that the opening up to a slow lane and a fast lane was what the net neutrality was trying to stop.
It is,
No.
yeah.
Well, yes, correct. It
Yeah.
is. So in other words, it keeps.
Are you clear now?
Thanks a lot, Susan. That's why
Yeah,
was
I do
looking
my
at
best. Go ahead, Cooper, explain it.
Oh yeah, well I was just going to say, so I mean, net neutrality has been the principle of the internet, I mean, for the past couple decades. In 2010, the FCC tried to preserve that status, and then that was challenged in court. The FCC lost, and that's why they had to make this vote to preserve net neutrality last week. So that's kind of the background.
It remains the same. As you and I know it, it stays the way it is.
And I'm afraid I don't believe that's what will happen, though.
Yeah.
I just simply don't.
But don't you think that, I mean, I guess the fear is that, you talk about the Wild West atmosphere, I feel like Wild West turns into monopoly pretty quickly once
Very quickly.
a few small players get involved.
First one is that we need to begin to phase out of the 6% sales tax that businesses pay on commercial leases. Only state in the union, only state that has a sales tax on commercial leases. So whenever you're leasing a building, well, you probably pay it here, unless you own this building. That anytime you pay a lease, there's a 6% sales tax.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a competitive disadvantage for every other state. So that's bad. We don't want to put ourselves at competitive disadvantages when trying to attract good businesses. Number 2 is phase out of the corporate income tax. That's something that's been underway, but it needs to be continued each year in the legislative session, or it'll get stuck at a level. The corporate income taxes, a lot of states that don't have it. And if we can get rid of ours entirely, that's not a huge hit to the state budget, but it's one of those little competitive things that helps us when trying to attract companies. And the third one is to permanently eliminate the state tax on manufacturing equipment. And it's under a temporary suspension right now. But it's about $140 million annually for companies. And while it doesn't sound like a lot, that's all money that manufacturing companies could pump back into their firms, into hiring, into equipment, that sort of thing. And manufacturing is one of those items that has the biggest return on investment. And so it's important to have that. There's like 17,000 or so manufacturing companies in the state of Florida. And so they're all having to pay a tax on this when they have equipment, except right now because it's temporarily suspended. So we need to just wipe that off the books. These three things would be three good actions to take to continue to make us more and more competitive with other states in the business climate.
All right, Candace.
Well, I mean, I love puppies, and yes, no taxes. I like it. I mean,
You
as a
do
business
not.
owner, no, but no, honestly, I agree with you. I think as a business owner, we need to do what we can to not only incentivize other businesses to come to the state of Florida, but also help the people that reward people for staying here and building their business here. So I agree with you.
Yeah, and Rod, I hate to disappoint you, but I actually agree as well.
Do I have to disagree with myself? Because I do see one downside with this.
What is what?
And that is that there's at least two of these taxes. There's a local portion, so every county and city in the state gets
counts
a
on
portion.
it.
And so what will happen there is that like Sarasota County is going to lose some amount of money. And I don't know if it's in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands out of their budget if these are eliminated. So there will have to be some sort of debate on making them whole in some way. Either they have to suck it up their loss like the state will, or the state will find an alternate funding source to replace that money.
Yeah, but I do agree with the idea that you said that it gives us an unfair advantage or disadvantage actually for the rest of the United States. I've had interviews with people that are a member of the Manufacturing Association, and they come in and they talk about it as well. And when they're trying to convince companies to move down here, knowing that there's that 6% tax on top of everything that they do. I mean,
So think about it. If you're trying to attract an out-of-state manufacturing firm here that needs to lease a facility that they want to manufacture in, right here are three strikes against them for trying to get them that will make it harder. And really seriously, we all want good jobs and all, so that is puppies. But we also really need to diversify the state's economy. And it's hard to do it, and it'll always be hard because we are naturally going to trend towards tourism because of all of our assets, and we're going to naturally tend towards retirement and growth because of, well, we're paradise. And so those two things are going to be strong no matter what. You don't limit those to diversify. You have to beef up other parts of the economy to diversify. That's the only way to diversify.
Do you know where the money is used locally when we get our piece of that pie, what it goes to?
Right, I don't. I just know that there's a chunk that Sarasota County, I know county commissioners are concerned about being made whole. They're trying to get the legislators to have that as part of the legislation.
I guess this is my only concern about the corporate income tax is then the burden just shifts more and more onto everyday people, correct? I mean, that money's going to come from sales taxes then?
I think I would argue that it's simply true that corporate income taxes fall to everyday people too, because the corporate taxes are passed through whenever possible to whoever they sell to.
sure, to
consumers
the
or business
consumer
to business.
anyway.
Right.
I mean, it's just a shift for us.
Right.
I think
But just,
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, you're going from income taxes to sales taxes. Those are two totally different types of taxes. Sales taxes being one of the most regressive and most heavily weighing on middle class and poor people. So wouldn't it be shifting from companies that are, I mean, making solid income to poor and working class folks?
well, if they're making a solid income, I'm thinking of the companies that come here and do a startup or to start, and the idea is that they would then be able to employ more people.
Sure, but right now there's an exemption for companies up to $50,000 to encourage those people, so those people don't have to pay taxes if that's what their income level is, and they're trying to make that exemption higher up.
You know how? $50,000 is
That is,
nothing.
I mean, I don't want to sound like some rich guy, which I'm not, but that's peanuts when
No.
you're talking about a company.
That's not even a. That's
So
not
then
even a
raise that,
startup.
but I mean, so you're just going to eliminate the whole thing. I mean, basically, I think you're just rewarding companies for, sort of
No,
skipping
there's
on the
no,
bills.
you're rewarding companies for being able to grow the economy and hire people. I think that's a good reward. I think we ought to do that, 'cause that
coming
helps
into
out.
the state.
Yeah, coming into the state, and that helps everybody. And if some more poor people can get a job and not be poor anymore, that's what we want to do. We don't want to put anything in the way of that.
Well, I will say that if you bring it down to the local level, and that kind of speaks to what Cooper's saying, is that what will our local government do? Well, chances are they're going to raise your taxes on your home. You're saying no.
No, they will not.
They
raise
won't?
it. They will. This county commission, I
No,
think, is
yeah,
pretty
I
firm on not raising the ad valorem tax.
But
Well, let's
they
mark
will-
it on the calendar.
Yeah, that was a facetious response. That
okay.
wasn't a sincere.
Okay.
They say that they're gonna have to. They're gonna have to do something. When you're talking about new home development, and Candace, you probably can speak on this as well. Raising those taxes on the developers who are bringing new homes in. You know, that's something that, I forget what they call it. Is it impact fees?
Oh boy,
Things
don't
like
get me
that.
started on
Don't get me
impact
started
fees.
on impact
Me and Rod
fees.
are gonna hold hands
Oh,
and we're
man.
gonna just.
But,
Talk about the
so
ultimate
they
pass-through
might not,
tax.
It's a moratorium.
they might not quote unquote raise a tax, but they'll certainly create fees. They'll find it somewhere, or they'll sell it to FP&L for another $1 million, and you know, we'll have another
Maybe
50 year.
if they need to, maybe they'll just prioritize and the least important thing they won't fund. I think that would be a really clever idea for
Oh, good
government to
luck
try
on that
sometime.
one.
I know, it's
Cutting
a
some
tough
of the
one.
fat?
Yeah.
What?
Wait,
How many times during the recession, when revenues were falling to Sarasota County, how many times did they raise the ad valorem taxes? It's a trick question.
they didn't.
Right.
They didn't,
Sure.
because they cut and they were able to do that, so they
But they
didn't
had an
shift the
incredible
burden.
slush fund to pull from as well.
That
They
close
don't
we're
have that
planning ahead.
anymore.
Maybe if we eliminated that county television program.
That's right. That would do it.
Give them what I
Cut
asked.
Channel 19.
Yeah, really.
No, I need
Tell me where the
those on
fat is
demand.
though in local government. Where's the fat in local government?
What, I mean, have you seen the county budget?
There's gotta be. I mean,
I mean,
yeah.
the county
it's-
budget's like
No, I
this.
get that, but I didn't
Well,
know if you were talking
what
about
I'm saying
anything
is,
specific.
I do not know. No.
But we just
No.
assume there is.
Yes.
Okay.
I think when you're talking about just a local county government
Let's
that's
assume
got
I'm brilliant.
it's an
We
800
can
or
go
not,
from there.
but an $800 million budget. I think there's probably places where you can find, if fat overstates it, then places where there can be
More efficiency?
more efficiencies. You can have creative partnerships in the private sector.
But also, I mean, let's
or other
look at
governments.
if we're attracting more business to the area, then we're building more homes, then more people are moving
Oh,
here.
goody. That's what we want.
No, that is
That
exactly
is
what
what
we
we
want,
want,
and that's
Susan.
clearly a show we need to do because I have a strong
Okay.
advocate on my
Yeah,
side for that
yeah,
one.
me
No, that's what I want to hear. All right, I'm working on Cooper. Cooper will be on
I
my
don't
side.
know
this
that you
time.
need to work on them very hard.
Well, I just think that I think ultimately somebody pays, and the problem I think with government is as soon as you cut down on services, then you have a lot of angry people and a lot of people who want their taxes lower than complaining about poor services, and so you have this contradiction. The money has to come from somewhere.
So it's important that everybody understands the connection between their taxes and their services.
Yes.